In early 2026, as the world watched weather maps turn blue and purple, New York City braced for a cold unlike any in living memory. The city, famous for its resilience and constant motion, was suddenly brought to a standstill by a force of nature that cared nothing for its reputation or history. New York City's relentless energy was silenced. The usual hum of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, and the glow of neon lights faded beneath a heavy, suffocating blanket of snow and ice. Streets that never slept became eerily quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. A brutal Arctic siege swept through, with wind chills plunging to record lows. The blizzard raged for days, making even the most basic tasks, like walking to the corner store or checking on a neighbor, dangerous if not impossible. The city's infrastructure, already strained, buckled under the weight of the storm. 18 people lost their lives, not just numbers, but neighbors, friends, and family members. Each was a person with dreams, struggles, and stories that ended far too soon. Their absence left a void in communities already stretched thin by hardship. At least 10 were found outdoors, exposed on frozen sidewalks and in the city's forgotten corners. Some had sought shelter in doorways, others beneath bridges or in alleyways, hoping to survive the night. For them, the city's vastness offered little protection from the cold. This crisis exposed the harsh reality for those without shelter, where warmth became an unattainable luxury. The city's most vulnerable, those living on the streets or in makeshift shelters, faced the storm with little more than thin blankets and hope. The cold was merciless, and for many, there was nowhere to turn. Emergency services worked tirelessly, but even their heroic efforts could not reach everyone in time. Hospitals filled with cases of hypothermia and frostbite, while shelters overflowed, unable to accommodate the sudden surge of need. The city's safety net, already frayed, was pushed to its breaking point. The tragedy forces us to ask, how can people freeze to death in a city of such resources? The stark contrast between heated high-rises and those shivering on the streets became impossible to ignore. The storm revealed not just a meteorological emergency, but a morale one. City officials promised investigations and reforms, but for many, these words came too late. Volunteers and community groups mobilized, distributing blankets, hot meals, and hope to those in need. Their compassion was a lifeline, but it could not undo the losses already suffered. Extreme weather is more than a meteorological event. It's a humanitarian crisis that tests our compassion and our systems. It asks whether we are willing to look out for one another, especially when the stakes are life and death. The memory of those lost must drive urgent action for better care and support for the homeless. Their stories should not be forgotten, nor should the lessons of this winter be ignored. We owe it to them, and to ourselves, to do better. The cold was the immediate cause, but the roots of this tragedy run deep in societal failures. Failures of policy, of empathy, and of imagination. The storm was a test, and in many ways, we failed. New York's heart must be moved to ensure this never happens again. The city's greatness is measured not by its skyline, but by how it cares for its most vulnerable. In the aftermath of the cold, we are left with a choice, to forget or to act. The future depends on what we do next. This was no ordinary winter. This was a season that would etch itself into the memory of every New Yorker. The city, famous for its energy and constant motion, suddenly found itself at the mercy of a cold so intense, it seemed to freeze time itself. An Arctic air mass, vast and unyielding, swept down from the north and locked New York in a relentless deep freeze. The city's usual winter chill was replaced by a biting, almost otherworldly cold that crept into every corner, every alley, and every home. For 13 consecutive days, temperatures stubbornly refused to rise above freezing. Each morning, New Yorkers awoke to the same frigid reality. Thermometers stuck well below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, with no sign of relief on the horizon. It was a streak of cold not seen since the legendary winter of 1963, a time many thought would never be repeated. Newspapers blared headlines about the historic chill, and old-timers swapped stories about winters past, marveling at the severity of this new freeze. The city became a giant refrigerator, apartment windows frosted over, rooftops blanketed in snow, and the air so cold it seemed to crystallize every breath. Even the most familiar city sights took on a surreal frozen beauty. Buildings strained under the weight of ice, water pipes burst in spectacular fashion, and every outing felt like a polar expedition. Sidewalks became treacherous, and the simple act of walking to the corner store required layers of clothing and steely determination. Emergency crews worked around the clock, responding to calls about frozen pipes and power outages. Residents banded together, helping neighbors shovel snow and sharing tips on how to keep warm when the heat faltered. Meteorologists pointed to a weakened polar vortex and a buckling jet stream as the culprits, explaining how these atmospheric phenomena had conspired to funnel Arctic air straight into the heart of the city. Icy gusts whipped through the avenues, making even the briefest walk outside a test of endurance. The wind seemed to find every gap in scarves and coats, chilling to the bone. Overhead, a stubborn high-pressure system parked itself above the city, pressing down and trapping the cold air below. The sky was often clear, but the sun offered little warmth, its rays glinting off snow and ice, powerless against the Arctic grip. The stillness was eerie. Steam from manhole covers hung in the air, unmoving, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for the thaw. Only on February 6th did the city finally catch a break. Temperatures inched above freezing for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, and icicles began to drip, signaling the slow return of warmth. For almost 14 days, New Yorkers rushed between heated spaces, faces hidden behind scarves and hats, eyes peeking out above layers of wool and fleece. The city's famous hustle became a hurried dash from one warm refuge to another. Children made the best of it, building snow forts and sledding in city parks, while families huddled indoors, sharing stories and hot drinks to keep spirits high. The wind's howl became the city's constant soundtrack, echoing through empty streets and alleys, underscoring the collective endurance of millions. This wasn't just another chapter in the city's long history of wild weather, it was a moment that would be remembered, a test of patience, resourcefulness, and community spirit. Neighbors checked on the elderly, strangers offered help to those stranded, and the city's sense of unity shone through the frost and snow. The cold tested New York's resilience like never before, but it also revealed the warmth and strength of its people, a city frozen but never defeated. The real danger wasn't just the temperature, it was the wind chill, accelerating heat loss from the body. Wind strips away the thin layer of warmth your body creates, making the air feel far colder and increasing risk. Hypothermia sets in when your core temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius, 995 Celsius, causing organs to fail. Early signs, shivering, numbness, confusion, can be subtle and deadly, especially for those already vulnerable. The cold could overwhelm even healthy people in minutes if unprotected. For the elderly, children, and those with health issues, the risk was even greater. Officials' warnings were urgent. Hypothermia is an invisible killer stalking the streets. Every walk outside became a gamble with life. The city's most vulnerable faced the greatest peril. Beyond hypothermia, another silent and insidious threat lurked in the winter air: frostbite. This condition didn't just chill the skin, it could freeze and destroy body tissue, sometimes in a matter of minutes. While hypothermia affects the body's core temperature, frostbite attacks the extremities, often without warning, and can leave permanent scars both physically and emotionally. In the biting cold, the body's natural response is to protect vital organs, redirecting blood flow away from the hands, feet, ears, and nose. This survival mechanism, while essential, leaves these areas dangerously exposed to the elements. Fingers, toes, ears, and noses were most at risk as the body prioritized core warmth. Even a short walk outside could put these parts in jeopardy, especially when temperatures plummeted and wind whipped through the streets. People bundled up, scarves pulled tight and hats pulled low, but any exposed skin was vulnerable. The first signs were subtle: tingling, redness, and a growing numbness that many ignored, thinking it was just the usual discomfort of winter. Frostnip, the mildest stage of frostbite, causes numbness and redness but is reversible with warmth. At this point, the skin may feel prickly or unusually cold, but if caught early, damage can be avoided. Rubbing hands together, seeking shelter, or simply warming up indoors can restore normal sensation. However, if ignored, the danger escalates quickly. Prolonged exposure leads to severe frostbite, skin turns white, hard, and numb. Deep tissue damage can require amputation. The affected area may lose all feeling, becoming waxy and immobile. In the worst cases, blisters form and tissue dies, leaving no option but surgical removal. The physical pain is matched only by the emotional toll, as victims must adapt to life with missing fingers, toes, or even limbs. In the deep freeze, exposed skin could freeze in just 10 to 15 minutes. The risk was highest during wind chills, when the cold seemed to cut straight through clothing. Even those who thought they were prepared could be caught off guard by the speed and severity of frostbite's onset. For many, a simple errand or a missed bus could turn into a medical emergency. For those sleeping outside, the risk was constant and inescapable. Homeless individuals, unable to find shelter, faced night after night of exposure. Blankets and makeshift coverings offered little protection against the relentless cold. Each sunrise was a small victory, but the damage from repeated exposure accumulated, often unnoticed until it was too late. The loss of a limb to frostbite is a life-altering permanent injury. It changes how a person moves, works, and interacts with the world. Prosthetics can help, but the psychological scars remain. The fear of the cold, the memory of pain, and the struggle to adapt become part of daily life. The cold left a cruel, silent mark on the city's most vulnerable. It was an invisible enemy, striking hardest at those with the fewest resources. For many, the winter months were a time of constant anxiety, as each day brought new risks and new challenges. Every minute outdoors was a risk for irreversible harm. Commuters hurried through the streets without them mice. Night versus down, hands buried deep in pockets, hoping to avoid the worst. But for some, the cold was unavoidable, a daily hazard that could not be escaped. The winter's toll extended far beyond what the eye could see. Emergency rooms filled with cases of frostbite and hypothermia, while city services struggled to keep up with the demand for shelter and aid. The true cost of the cold was measured not just in lost limbs, but in lost opportunities, lost security, and lost lives. Survival was a daily battle against the elements. For many, it was a fight that demanded constant vigilance, resilience, and hope. qualities tested to their limits by the silent danger that winter brought to the streets. As the Arctic cold intensified, New York declared a code blue emergency. This protocol relaxes shelter rules. No one can be turned away when temperatures drop below freezing. The city rapidly expanded shelter capacity, converting 64 hotel rooms into emergency spaces. Each room became a lifeline for someone facing the deadly cold. Since late January, about 1,400 people were brought in from the streets. This massive effort required coordination across agencies and quick action. Code Blue was the city's emergency alarm, mobilizing resources to save lives. The goal: get everyone indoors. Fast. It was a race against time and temperature. Opening shelters wasn't enough. Many on the streets were reluctant to come in. The city deployed 150 extra outreach workers, braving the cold to find and help those in need. Teams searched underpasses, subway entrances, and parks, building trust in minutes. They offered rides to shelters, warm gear, and urgent medical checks. Every successful placement was a life saved. Every refusal met with supplies and compassion. Outreach workers became the frontline heroes, connecting with the city's most isolated. Their persistence made the difference between life and death. For most, the cold was an inconvenience. For the homeless, it was a fight for survival. The same wind that rattled windows was a deadly force for those sleeping outside. People sought warmth in subways, building entryways, and over steam grates. Desperate measures, not choices. Constant exposure weakened bodies, making illness and exhaustion inevitable. The psychological toll, stress, fear, and isolation was just as severe. 18 people died, most found outdoors, their struggles unseen until it was too late. Each death marked a failure of the safety net and outreach. The crisis exposed the city's deep disparities. Behind every statistic was a human story of loss. The tragedy demands we do better for our most vulnerable. As the freeze ended, new hazards emerged with the thaw. Melting snow and ice slid from rooftops, threatening pedestrians below. Daytime melting and nighttime refreezing created treacherous black ice on streets and sidewalks. Massive snow piles clogged drains, causing flooding and slushy chaos at every corner. The city's infrastructure, already strained, faced new tests. Navigating the city became a wet, hazardous ordeal. The transition from deep freeze was messy and dangerous. Relief from the cold brought its own set of risks. As the snow melted, New York faced hard truths from the winter of 2026. The Code Blue response and outreach saved lives, but 18 deaths remain unacceptable. We must expand outreach, lower shelter barriers, and create lasting pathways off the streets. Climate change means more extreme weather. Cities must be ready. Resilient infrastructure and public education are essential. The cold exposed the struggles of our most vulnerable neighbors. Our response must be measured by how we protect those with the least. The memory of those lost must drive us to build a more compassionate city,